Hello and welcome to the Promised Land, a show about Manchester United and part of the 90 Min podcast network. I'm Scott Saunders, joined by Rob Blanchette as ever. And finally, we can confirm, if you saw the match last night, we can confirm that Manchester United are in the Champions League. Finally, they have done it with one match to spare, Rob. There is a big sigh of relief around the fan base.
That's definitely how I felt after the game, was a big sigh of relief. You never know, do you, in those moments, what's going to happen? Obviously, the scoreline is impressive from United. The performance wasn't, but you got over the line. All you needed was that draw. We said a goalless draw, a boring 0-0 would be okay. But just good to get it all over and done with before the Fulham match. No more of this writing the storyline about Mitrovic turning up at Old Trafford to get his revenge. Yeah, get your revenge. It doesn't matter now, does it? You know, we're in the Champions League. So mission accomplished, as I keep saying about Ten Hag. Top four this year was the minimum, and that was the standard, and they've hit it. It's been up and down, hasn't it? Roller coaster. And you've ended up with a trophy in your pocket on top of that, and potentially a second trophy. So a really, really amazing first season for this manager, when there were so many things in the season that really challenged him as a coach. He has passed the test.
Yeah, it's encouraging to see the likes of Erik Ten Hag and Bruno Fernandes saying after the game that, no, we want more. Like Erik Ten Hag said something, we need better players, which was I think the last line of his press conference released on the Thursday night after the game, which shows that now finally United can actually, I know they have a cup final ahead, but you have a match to prepare for at the weekend, which is more about preserving the fitness of your players and making sure that people are rested for the big game that's coming in about 10 days time or 8 days time, whatever it is. And United can now look forward. So we'll talk on today's show about some transfer business or some transfer planning that United are looking at, what they should be doing. And you probably can guess, because they're probably in the title of this show. We haven't decided what it is yet, but you can probably guess who we're going to talk about. They all play for England. So enjoy that. But yes, we'll also talk a little bit about the Chelsea game itself, because there were some massive holes in that performance, despite winning 4-1. United could have scored 10, but they also could have conceded 5 or 6 at the same time. So, plenty of issues there. But yes, subscribe to our show wherever you get your pods and watch us on YouTube twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays as well. Head over to the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment for us, and follow us on Twitter @_Scott Saunders, @_Rob_B, and @PromiseLandMU for the show. So we will talk Chelsea to start with, because there was a period in the first half, Rob, which was quite loose, to put it nicely.
That is nice.
Yeah, it was very nice. Casemiro with the early goal, obviously, and a second consecutive game that he scored in. But what we did see in that game, and what I've said this on this podcast all season long, that Eriksen plus Casemiro does not work for me. And to be honest, I think we saw that again in this game against Chelsea, even though United did eventually win 4-1. But that's more of a reflection on how bad Chelsea are than anything about how good United are,
Yeah, totally. Look, I think as well, the situation itself dictates the setup and what you're looking for in your performance. So we know United played that 4-1-5 all season long, and they're kind of, in these weeks gone by, to solidify stuff, are kind of playing a more 4-1-4-1. So that was the shape last night. And you see there that the two extra midfielders, bar Casemiro, kind of floating eights. They play that 8 role where they kind of keep a tight line. And what you saw was United trying to press quite high up the pitch, quite busy and looking to do it, and failing miserably. So this was the issue, is that I thought Casemiro had a really good game, obviously gets you your goal, did all the Casemiro things that we've been asking him to do for the last few weeks that he was doing a few months ago. And I think that's a success. But Eriksen and Bruno as the 8s were almost a disaster. Like, this is a Chelsea team full of kids, and they were just strolling through your press with 1 or 2 passes. And it was quite hard to watch at times. Like, there was a lot of me shouting at them last night. I was like, hold your shape, look after the space, please don't give the ball away. All of that stuff that we've heard many times before. So, yes, I think that this is kind of when we look at the squad building now for the summer, it's Casemiro +1 in that role, isn't it? Is that he's your number 6, but you definitely need a number 8 who can do more number 6 things, and also a number 8 that can do more number 10 things, because that is about the fabric of your midfield. Yeah. And you saw last night against a really bad Chelsea team that United couldn't quite cut it. So, you know, we'll talk about the cup final, obviously, next week. We've got that massive game to come against Manchester City. But of course, if you put that display at Wembley against Man City, you're getting absolutely smashed by 6 or 7 or 8 goals. You just are, because Kevin De Bruyne will be doing a merry Belgium jig all over your grave. It will be a nightmare. But we'd have to worry about that because you won 4-1 somehow. And like you just said there, it could have been 6-all, couldn't it, in this game? It was so weird. United gave away so much territory, but managed to get the goals, obviously, that made it a relatively easy night for the players to obviously get Champions League football.
It was like a game of basketball at times.
Totally. It was the
NBA. Yeah, it really was. And I think I will cut them some slack in a sense of it did feel a bit end of season. You know, I think if United have maybe had a bit more pressure on them in the fact that Liverpool had beaten Aston Villa on the weekend, I think maybe we would have seen a bit of a tighter performance. But in the end, I think that, I think the end of season feel came into it a little bit. It did have that vibe around it. Chelsea don't really have anything to play for, really. And I think we just saw people having fun in a sense.
Was it fun?
Well, I enjoyed the game. I thought the game was quite good. It was chaos, but that's not what you want in a football team.
No, it's not exactly. Like I think if it's the end of the season, then you expect things to be a little bit slower, less dramatic, and you might find that people are not playing the final ball and all of that. United were playing with energy, but like a bunch of madmen. Like what was the system to press and let Chelsea walk through you? Literally dozens of times. So I think the thing is that you could see Ten Hag again from his station where he is on the halfway line, and there was a lot of what's going on here, and there was a lot of yapping to the team. But I don't know. Again, Scott, like it seems like a rhetorical comment that goes round and round and round and round and round. You've got these experienced players in your midfield and other positions, and they go into a game like that, and it almost doesn't feel serious. Like you're just saying there that like Liverpool have helped United. Well, what if this was Liverpool's opportunity here now to go and get you? Because you could have lost to Chelsea playing like that yesterday. You could have done. Chelsea could score 1 or 2 or 3 goals. It's a completely different game, isn't it? So look, there's not going to do a big kind of like post-mortem on it because you won the game. You won it pretty well in the end. You said it was, it's kind of exciting. And I think the narrative needs to be, well done, tick, 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 tick. You're in the Champions League. Well done, lads. And I think that when you look at where we were, maybe after Brentford and going through the season, they've done amazingly well to get here. And with some injuries as well, and poor form and Ronaldo and all of that horrible stuff. So that's what kind of we can focus on. But seeing that game last night does give you the opportunity to look just a little bit forward into the next month or two and about what you absolutely have to do in the Champions League. Oh, sorry, in the transfer window to get anywhere in the Champions League and the Premier League. Like it's not worth being in the top 4 for next season, this team to roll itself out, because better teams will just hammer you in midfield. And we've been hammered by the top 9 all season long away from home. Yes, we all know that has to be fixed, but that has to come through signings now. And yeah, we all want a striker, but I'm telling you, Scott, you're going to need a couple of midfielders.
Well, let's do the striker part first, because we know that we've talked about Harry Kane since December. Really, yes. We said this was coming, didn't we? Yes. Before it was even out there that United would want Harry Kane. Latest suggestions are Daniel Levy doesn't want to sell Harry Kane, which is wow, I can't believe it. I'm absolutely shocked. We've said this the entire time that Harry Kane's going to have to push to get out of Tottenham. And it really depends on if he's prepared to push to get out of Tottenham or not. And if he does push to get out of Tottenham and goes public about it, like he did with the Gary Neville interview, maybe he doesn't have to do that specifically, but at least make it known internally that he wants out. Just text
Gary, couldn't he?
He could.
Just tell Gary.
I mean, that would, I'm sure Gary Neville would lap that up,
Yes.
But yeah, United obviously have to explore alternative options just in case this deal either doesn't happen or takes 3 months, because they can't be waiting 3 months and signing Harry Kane on August 31st or something like that. They just can't do it. You have to move your priorities on from that. But that is the latest on Harry Kane. I'm sure that we will hear more about it. But to state the obvious, Harry Kane needs to push to get out of Spurs, and Daniel Levy doesn't want to sell him. So we are where we are.
Yes, and as I said, we've known about the whole Kane situation for many months now, and we've kind of commented on it repeatedly without trying to be particularly boring about the subject. But the most important thing for Man United in this potential deal was to get Champions League football. You get Champions League football, and you can put that on Harry Kane's lap, then the deal itself starts to work itself out in terms of like wages, transfer fee, what Spurs will want out of the deal. Of course, Spurs are going to project out into the open world that they want one of their own, their captain, to stay. And of course they want him to stay. But we know he doesn't want to stay. So that gives Man United the option there of being able to put a bid together and to bring the player to the football club and to make sure that all of those pieces work for Spurs as well. And I think the other side of this is, Scott, and I did mention it last week, you know, I think people think that Spurs really desperately want to keep Harry Kane. Do they? I'm not quite sure now. I think that they're in a rebuilding phase. And yes, if Kane wanted to stay, they'd give him the biggest contract on earth, he would stay. He doesn't want to stay. And that sometimes puts football clubs' nose out of joint. They look at it and they kind of go, okay, then thank you for your service. Here's your mural outside the ground forevermore because you're a record scorer and whatnot. But that's it. We're done. And we're going to get 80, 90, 100 million for you. So that's going to be the conversation now between United and Spurs, is about what do Spurs necessarily want to get the player go. But they do have a fee. I'm 100% convinced that they will have a fee and Man United will have to match it to get the player out of the club. And it's a big opportunity, Scott, to go and get one of the world-class elite strikers in world football, you know, at the top of his game still, even though he is aging. You know, he's an incredible footballer that solves 8 or 9 issues for you in one transfer. That's massive for Erik ten Hag.
Well, Harry Kane probably would have taken one of those chances that United made in the first 15 minutes.
I think he'd have taken a hat-trick.
Yeah.
He'd get a hat-trick yesterday. No problem. He'd have walked those balls in the net. The things that Martial missed yesterday, yeah, Harry Kane absolutely buries those from 12 or 15 yards with his eyes closed. And that's what you're losing, isn't it? If you don't sign a player like that, you're not as good. You're not going to be where you potentially could be.
Of course, we await to see what happens there. But there's every chance that this could be a ploy on the United side to say, hey, Dan, why am I saying this? Hey, Mr. Levy, you realize that you're going to lose Harry Kane for free next year if he doesn't sign a new contract. So you can either do business with us now, or you lose out on potentially up to 100 million quid. And that's your choice. And because Spurs can use that to rebuild if they buy the right players. But yes, that we're not really any closer to knowing either way. I think this today, the reports out today, is a state of the obvious, absolutely. But what United have done by beating Chelsea is secure top 4. So what that does mean is that they become a more appealing prospect for players who potentially want to join them. Mm-hmm. They have better financial backing and financial commitments coming into them throughout next season. And it's cast iron proof, really, that Erik ten Hag, if he gets what he wants, he's probably going to move in the right direction. So I think it's on the basis of everything, really. This was absolutely what United needed to achieve. And what we did see in the Chelsea game was, as we've touched on already, the gaps in midfield are just there. They are extensive. Eriksen and Bruno Fernandes plus Casemiro it might work in some games, but it's not going to work in every single game. So you do need other options. And since we've last recorded, we have seen suggestions that Mason Mount, who is in his final year of his contract at Chelsea, has a preference to move to Manchester United over potentially Liverpool or even Arsenal, who've been linked with him as well. So we'll discuss in a second, is he the right profile player for United to go after? And also, should we do that first, Rob, or should we come back and should we do them as a pair? Declan Rice is the other one.
We can do it however you want, Scott.
So Declan Rice is the other one. And suggestions are that United are interested in Declan Rice, but West Ham don't want to go beneath 100 million quid to sell Declan Rice. So that is a hell of a lot of money to spend. Personally, I see the appeal for United in both of them. If you were to sign one player in midfield, I think you could get away with it being Declan Rice. I don't think you could get away with one midfield signing being Mason Mount. I would ideally like to see two, but not Mount on his own, because I think the profile of player, like what I've been saying for a lot of the time, is Declan Rice is actually tall. Just being very reductive. United lack a bit of aerial presence, a bit of aerial defensive presence, a bit of aerial threat in both boxes, and they lack a player who has a defensive brain, who can travel with the ball back to front between both boxes. Declan Rice has got a bit of a final third in him. He can convert chances when he gets into those positions, but I really think that Declan Rice for me is the perfect option, because we know that Casemiro is in the club at the moment, but he probably next season is not going to be able to do 65 games a season, starting every single game. And United don't have the rotation option beneath him. I think Declan Rice can be the person that plays alongside Casemiro and also the replacement for Casemiro if Casemiro isn't there. That is why Declan Rice, for me, is first choice in midfield, but the price is a big swing. But Rob, what's your take on? You can do one, you can do both. What's your take?
Well, I think, look, you look at these, three lions in our shirt. That's the catchphrase for the show here. Are we going to get these three players? Are they exactly what we need? I think in terms of like priority, and if you stacked them up, it would be Kane, Rice, Mount. I think the reality of it is that it's probably more like Mount, Rice, Kane. So you have to work within those parameters, because it's what you're dealing with the football clubs and the complications of those deals. But what we do know is that Declan Rice has been told that he can leave. So that's done. West Ham will find an offer for him.
For the right price,
he can leave for the right price. But that's football. Like everyone leaves for the right price. No one goes for a cheap price. So he'll go for the right price. Mason Mount, someone that you thought would have been a lifer at Chelsea, totally. This was a guy that helped them win the Champions League not so long ago and was a Ballon d'Or nominee, stunningly that season. Mason Mount's not a bad player, but Mason Mount knows his time at Chelsea is over, even with Pochettino coming to the football club. So there's that. With the Harry Kane thing, we've just kind of talked around that, and you kind of have to wait and see. But every one of these players, Scott, all three of them, yes, they're English, but they address the problems that you have, and they're gettable because of these scenarios. And they're gettable even within the budget of a transfer kitty. So yes, Kane's going to be 80, 90, 100. Rice, I would say the same, 80, 90, 100. I know West Ham have put that 120 figure out there, but they're not getting it. But Mount also...
they'll get 100 if they sell.
I think they'll get 100, but it depends who they're selling to. Like, who really wants him? Who does he need? Who does he want to go to? There's every chance of his best friend being Mason Mount, that Mason Mount is coming to Man United and wants to go to Man United, that Declan Rice will want to go to Man United. There is that. So I think the thing is that when a good player comes onto the market, it's very difficult to judge the ceiling of the price, because it's really whatever the demand is at that point. And we know that Declan Rice is a player that has kind of done great things over the last 2 or 3 or 4 years, but who really needs that kind of 6'8"? Now, you could go to all the top clubs, like you could say Man City could take him, but they've got a Rodri. So, Rice probably looking at it going, well, how much do I play? Look at what's happened with the lad from Leeds. Sorry, I've forgotten his name suddenly at City. Calvin Phillips, his best mate. Yeah, so Calvin Phillips, his England mate, he's gone to Man City. He's won a title, yeah, but he hasn't played any football. And he even said the other night, it's been a disastrous season for me. So I think there are things like that. Manchester United's quite an open door for a lot of these players. They're all looking at the project and going, yeah, United are sneaking back into contention now. They look pretty good. They play good football. The manager is pretty good. And there's a good vibe about it. And do you know what? I'm going to be the one that gets them over the top. So I think when you look at Rice and you look at Mount, I think they do tick the boxes again of what you need. Man United needs someone that is not Casemiro, who can play the 6 and also play an 8 role. And then they need a more kind of diverse midfielder who can play both sides of the 8, who can play in the forward line and play the 10. Mason Mount is an absolute little genius at that. Now, I know a lot of people will not agree with me on that because I say he's had a bad year. But Mount, up until very, very recently, was showing that he was an elite standard European top-class footballer. He really is. So if you can go and execute those deals, Scott, they do answer some of the questions. I think Ten Hag's posed to all of us all season long and saying, well, you know, Scott McTominay's all right, isn't he? But he's not the answer. Fred, not the answer. Some of the kids that we've bigged up and said we want to see, them Kobe Manus, maybe the answer one day, but not the answer right this second. So you've got to bring quality to the football club. And I think those 3 players, good cultural signings, they'll come in. I think they'll work with the dressing room. They're mates with a lot of the people there at the football club already. And they're quality. So this is not kind of some, I don't know, vanity project of just let's fill the squad full of English players. Because I think there'll be a lot of United fans who will already be like, oh, they're not good enough because they're English. I hear about Harry Kane all the time. He's not good enough. But I know if Harry Kane was Brazilian, people would say he'd be best striker in the world. So there's a balancing point there, isn't there, about what you really need. I think United could get all 3. I really do. I think they can get all 3, but I'd want them to do it quickly. Like, if you're going to do it, go get them. Like, don't mess around till the end of the summer and then have to go and get slim pickings for the start of the campaign because you haven't got your targets.
Do you think any of this is attached to the ownership situation?
Potentially, yes. Like we've asked these questions really the last 2 or 3 days to try and find out what's smoke and what is a kind of, you know, what's real, what's not real. And that's always the issue with these scenarios going into a transfer window. That's why I call it silly season. Yeah, we do know that one side of the ownership or potential new ownership wants to put names out there, but I don't think the names actually match what you would normally expect. Like, Mason Mount is not let's stun the United faithful with a bit of washing here, there and everywhere, is it? Let's be honest. So I think it's a good signing. I think it's a signing that someone that Ten Hag would want. I don't think it is at the moment. We don't believe that this is just ownership hot and bluster. What I do think is that Man United will buy players one way or the other. This is not going to be, the Glazers have stayed and you've only got, like people say, you've only got 50 million to spend. That's not happened ever in 10 years. Like, United have had spent money every single season and have spent it on dross. So let's buy some good players. And yes, let's get rid of the Glazers. That would be fantastic. But if they stay, United are going to buy people and are going to buy players. Make sure they're good ones that you can use.
Well, I know that there might be some people watching who are saying Declan Rice and Mason Mount aren't good. But I've always been an advocate for Declan Rice. Even when we started doing this podcast, me and Rob were talking about Declan Rice, and I was saying then they should buy Declan Rice. And that was 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And we all know that Declan Rice is playing in the Premier League. Yes, he has his flaws, but at the same time, how can you expect a player like that to realize his entire potential if he's playing for West Ham? You know, of course. He has the bare essentials to do everything that a modern midfielder needs to do. Yeah. And on Mason Mount's case, it's not the automatic pick. I wouldn't have made that automatic choice. But there's a reason why Gareth Southgate keeps picking Mason Mount. There's a reason why Eric Ten Hag wanted Mason Mount when he was at Ajax and why Eric Ten Hag wants Mason Mount now. There's a reason why Thomas Tuchel loved Mason Mount. There's a reason why Pochettino wants to keep Mason Mount. Just because, you know, these coaches look at certain values that players have. Mount's energy is great. I mean, yeah, you can talk about his pass accuracy and all this kind of thing, but they have the raw essentials, and they would imprint and they would carry out exactly what Eric Ten Hag wants to do. Mount is that good example of a player that does that. Completely.
And this is how, you know, you don't need superstars in every position. You need players that work and do the job. That is really it at the end of the day. And yeah, like I put out yesterday a tweet about a dream scenario that if United got these 3 players, it's a dream scenario. And of course, what do you get from Twitter straight away? The same old rubbish blowback. Oh, they're not dream players, are they, Rob? Well, no, they're not dream players. Like, you know, do you go to bed at night and dream of Harry Kane? Probably not. You know, that's fine. Everyone's allowed to have their own opinion that Osimhen is a sexier signing and that De Jong is a better midfielder than Mason Mount. But it's about what's available at the time, Scott, and what you can do and how you can move them on and get them into your team. You look at Mount, you know, we know that Bayern Munich have registered their interest with Chelsea with him. They are interested in him because they would like him, but he said that he's going to stay in England. So this is the whole narrative shifting towards Manchester United and the advantage that United have now in this potential deal. And I think when you look at Mason Mount, again, I know it's not the popular thing to say, but I'm going to say it because I've said it all season long. So I'm going to stick with it. And that is that as good as Bruno is in the 10, And he is brilliant in the 10 when he's on the front foot in the box and around that. He can make things happen. In the next third of the pitch, in the middle, he is average and he gives the ball away too much. And you need another option in there. So I think that when you've got Mount, who is a very natural number 10 in a 4-3-3 or in a 4-2-3-1, it's not rocket science. It doesn't mean that Bruno doesn't start. Bruno would start, but you've seen in the last few weeks that Bruno's gone back to 10, Scott. You know, the last 2, 3, 4, 5 games out of necessity. I don't think he's been brilliant on the ball. He's been good at times, but he couldn't keep the ball for Toffee last night. He couldn't. Back heels, little shimmies, little moves, trying to move the ball around. No, you don't need to be clever here. You need to be smart. So I think Mason Mount's a really smart footballer. He puts it on the deck. He's clean. He's like a clean guitar tone, you know, like you can hear all the clarity in his game. That's what he is. And I think for 50, 60 million, that you're laughing like that's a player 1 or 2 years ago would have been in a much higher bracket. And that's why Chelsea are quoting 80.
That's a really valid point as well, actually, to make. Chelsea are in a position where they have, when their loan players come back, they will have 45 plus players. They will have that many players. And they're in a position where you talk about FFP. They do need to shift players on before the 30th of June. And they're in a position where quickly every club in the world, or every club in the Premier League at least, who can potentially buy from Chelsea will know that Chelsea are in this position where they do need to shift players off their books.
Yeah.
Mauricio Pochettino is not going to want... He works traditionally with small squads anyway. He's going to want a squad of 23, probably. Especially if Chelsea, maybe even smaller than that, if Chelsea aren't in European competition. So we'll see how that goes. So that means inevitably that Chelsea are going to have to potentially compromise on some deals. So United are in a strong position here. If Mason Mount has decided, I want to go there, United could put a bid down on the table and Chelsea might want 80 million. You could say, we're paying you 55. Take it or leave it. He wants to come here. And then we'll wait.
Exactly.
It's as simple as that.
And just thought off the top of my head here, and I think I've used a similar comparison in recent weeks. We talked about transfers, but it does kind of remind me of the Michael Carrick deal at Tottenham. So when he was at Tottenham, he'd had one really good season in midfield, obviously playing for England, coming through the ranks. And when he was linked with us, most Man United fans raised their eyebrows and went, well, how does this guy mesh with Paul Scholes? Like, this is not really what we need. What we're looking for is our next Roy Keane. Surely that's what we want. We want Roy Keane. Well, there isn't another Roy Keane out there, so you have to change what you do. Now, obviously, history tells us that Michael Carrick was a phenomenal signing, probably the best screening midfielder in Premier League history, and was a massive integral part of what United did for many, many years. But in year 1 and 2, United fans were still not sold on him. They were like, well, yeah, he is skillful and he's good, but he's a bit slow. And, you know, he slows the play down. We don't want this. We don't want a number, you know, someone who plays in that number 6 role a bit deeper. We want something different. But I think Mason Mount is exactly the kind of profile you need as a number 8. Like, if you take his name out of it, Scott, Mason Mount from Chelsea, throw that in the bin and just have the player's profile of what he does in his stats and his metrics, you're getting hot. You're looking at that and going, this guy is elite off the ball, elite on the ball, can score you the odd goal every now and then, pretty decent at set pieces, and is an intelligent thinking footballer. Yes, please. I want more of that. I want more of that and less McTominay and less Fred. So if this ends up with McTominay and Fred going out the door and you bring in a Mount as a replacement and then a Declan Rice, just to say, Scott, is the closest thing in modern football to Roy Keane.
I was going to say that, and I thought, no, yeah. I'm not going to.
I'm going to say it because I, you know, like obviously, this is me doing this for Twitter, obviously, and obviously I'll get shot for it, and that's what it is. But in profile terms, someone like
23-year-old Roy Keane,
23-year-old Roy Keane, when 23-year-old Roy Keane came from Nottingham Forest to us, he didn't have a defensive bone in his body. Like, he didn't. He was a forward-thinking player. His idea was to go from the 8 and run in the box and score goals. And he did on his debut, scored twice for us. So that was the kind of player he was. And over many years, morphed into a number 6 or a deeper lying midfielder role. Rice is already there at a younger age. Rice can already do the defensive work. He's happy in that quarterback role. He's a much better passer than people give him credit for. And go look at his metrics. They are all there. The proof is there for you to see. And he's controlled this West Ham team for so long and been the star. He's the one who's kept them going and had good seasons because of Declan Rice. And of course, he's shone for England. We know this. He's been brilliant for England over a long period of time. So you can go get him now for 100 million. He's absolutely a 100 million pound midfielder. If Jack Grealish is a 100 million pound midfielder, yeah, Declan Rice is definitely a 100 million pound footballer. And I think this is where the world and the market shifts, Scott, because if you'd said that a year or two ago that Declan Rice was going to be around 100 million, you'd gone, not for me. No, like for a 6 and all of that. These players have become much more valuable and important now to projects. Man United needs someone who's, can take games by that, go into games and have that hard edge to them, but at the same time can play. And Declan Rice would not look out of sorts at Man United. He would not look out of sorts at Manchester City. He's that good. So I know that he's not hot and people don't look at him and go, oh, yeah, he's the kind of player I want, because he's Declan Rice at the end of the day from West Ham. But, we bought a boy from West Ham many years ago called Paul Ince, and he made that step up and showed when people said to him that he wasn't going to be good enough, and he won titles at United. So I think that these 3 players overall, yeah, they would be really, really good signings, and you could sign them within your budget.
Declan Rice is 24. I've just given him a quick Google, and there's a suggestion from some of the British papers that he prefers Arsenal. But
because of London. So like we said, I think I said that 2 weeks ago. I said the big decision for Declan Rice is, do I stay in London? But that then really narrows it down to Arsenal and Chelsea at the moment. Like Spurs, you could say as well, but Spurs are not going to spend that money. And Chelsea, who have courted him for a long time, he's an ex-Chelsea boy, have basically gone cold on him. That's just what it is. So it leaves you with Arsenal. Arsenal definitely want a central midfielder, but does he fit with what they do if you're going to still have Partey there?
I think he does. The issue for me that I see with Arsenal is, do they want to meet West Ham's asking price?
Of course. And I think Arsenal are going to spend big this summer. I really do. I think they're going to spend quite a lot of dollars, and people will be shocked with how much money they spend, because I think they're at that part of their project. But I don't think Declan Rice is exactly what they are looking for. Like people said as well about Mason Mount, Mount to Arsenal. Well, he's a kind of Arteta type player, but he is, but he's not playing in that team. Like, he's not getting in the team ahead of the likes of Saka and Martinelli. He just isn't in those wider roles, and he's not playing instead of Odegaard. So if you're Mason Mount, you're looking at that and going, well, yeah, you're doing well, Arsenal, but not for me. I go to Man United, I'll probably play every week if I play well, and I'm probably going to get more money at Man United as well than I will do at Arsenal, because they have a bigger pay structure. So these things all do come into play, and they are very intricate and nuanced. But I also think, Scott, this has got to come down to what you need. We know what Ten Hag really needs. He could do with 5 or 6 players, but you're not going to get that. So if you get 3 or 4, say you got these 3, and you could somehow get Kim on top, or maybe you don't get Kim, but you get a goalkeeper, like you pay 25 million for Raya. I know you'd be happy with that, then you're moving forward, aren't you? And I think whoever the owner is, whether it's the Glazers or anyone else, they know this. They're going to have to put big money up in the next 2 or 3 windows to make sure that you don't just stay in the Champions League, but you compete, because that's really important for the profile of the kind of squad play that you can bring in.
Yeah, we'll see how that develops. Obviously, United are now putting the wheels in motion, or at least putting the feelers out, I would suppose, to go after the players that they want to bring in. And we've seen Man United for 10 years drag their heels in the transfer market. And obviously the ownership situation is a cloud that's hanging over everything at the moment. But if that is resolved as quickly as we hope it will be, at least if there's a preferred bidder who can just get cracking, United are better off getting as many of these players in as they can before they jet off to the US.
Yeah. Well, look, I think if the Glazers are letting their powder dry in terms of what's on the table, like they know what's on the table. It isn't a secret. They know exactly what they really want to do. They're just not announcing it. They'll announce it in their own good time, and that's their prerogative as the owners. But I do think that we know that Jim Ratcliffe, if Jim Ratcliffe is the preferred bidder, and that emerges in the next few days and weeks, we know that Jim Ratcliffe has said to the Glazers, I want complete control of transfers now. Like, I'm not waiting. I want to be able, if this is my money going into the club and this is Ineos's money, we are not going to wait till the last 2 weeks of the window and then go splurging, and try and bring in players that we don't really want. We're going to bring in players that fit what the manager wants. And we do know that Jim Ratcliffe and Eric Ten Hag have had conversations. So the whole point of this is that we don't want to second guess a lot of that, and it will emerge. But United are not going to spend money because the Glazers are just kind of sitting on their hands a little bit. We do think the Glazers might end up hanging around with a minority stake, and we'll have to swallow that. But the most important thing here, Scott, is that the Glazers are not in control of our football club. Yeah, the debt is gone, the debt is moved away, and that we can go and buy players and say to these players, right, this is a 5-year project now under Ten Hag, brand new owners. Declan, we want you here for 5 years. Mason, we want you here for 5 years. And guess what, Harry? We want you to finish your career with us, and we want you to score 200 goals for us in the next 5 seasons. I think they're quite like that.
Yes, we'll see how it unfolds. Let us know. I know which way these comments are going to go.
Tell us.
We had loads of comments. We had loads of comments on the last video, by the way. So keep them coming in. We really appreciate it. Let us know what you think of any of those players. We've done Harry Kane to death, but Declan Rice and Mason Mount are... Mason Mount's a new name in the frame. Let's just say that. I think Declan Rice we've touched on before, but I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. And maybe you can... Maybe a criticism could be that, oh, maybe there's a player that Mason could do what Mason Mount does, who's in some obscure league in South America, that could do the same job that would cost a third of the price. But at the same time, you don't get the guarantee that they work straight away. Whereas with Mason Mount, at least you've seen him play Premier League and Champions League and all these different competitions. And you know that if you watched him enough for the last few years, he can plug straight in.
To me, that's important. You see, I always talk about Premier League ready talent. I talk about that a lot, and it's really hard to get it because you normally have to pay a premium for what you want them to do. And if they're going to be a squad player and you're paying 70, 80, 90 million, Scott, then that's not great business, is it? But, these 3 players as a collective would cost a lot of money, but do they make you much better than what you are today? And I think when we've analysed all of the issues that Man United had this year and this phenomenal season to get in the Champions League, these 3 players really do upgrade you. They're not sexy names, but I don't think you need sexy names. Like Neymar is a sexy name, but I want to stay well away from Neymar, even though he is a generational talent and an icon. He's not what we need. He's trouble. So that's a problem. I don't want trouble. I think these 3 lads actually would integrate into the kind of squad that Ten Hag is trying to build. And he's spoken in the last week, Scott, quite a bit about culture again. He's gone back to it. I'm looking for a cultural kind of player. I want a player who comes in. I think he's kind of saying, Scott, he wants players to come in and do as they're told. That's what he wants. 3 players who come in who are hungry. He don't care what wages they're on. He don't pay the bills, does he? He's the manager. And he's saying, I want you 3 to come in, win me football matches. Think about the top games United have lost this year. Was it 8 out of 9 this year or 9 out of 10, isn't it, this year on the road in those top 9? Do those 3 players help you in those scenarios? Definitely. I think you maybe win 3 or 4 of those. And then you've got an extra 10 points in your pocket, Scott. So you can jump these levels with players that are not necessarily superstars. But I would say Harry Kane is a superstar. Come on, he could be he's had almost as good a season as Haaland when you look at the metrics. He really, really has. Just that Haaland is the bright new shiny toy and Man City are winning everything. So Harry Kane's had a stunning season with Tottenham Hotspur in a really bad Tottenham team. So I think that's valuable. And Man United could do a little bit of that with the top end of the pitch, number 9.
Let's, we've done transfers. I'm sure we'll do transfers quite frequently in the next few weeks, just because
no choice.
There's no choice. We'll also do some maybe end of season content for you as well, looking back at individual performance. I don't know. We'll have this conversation and we'll bring more.
You tell us, people.
You tell us
in the comments. What do you want to see in the summer? We're going to do transfer shows. We know this. We'll do tactical shows. We'll look at bits and bobs. We'll do all of those things. But it's good to hear from you because you give us ideas. And this is your show at the end of the day. People are watching this show. This is for you. That's why me and Scott do it. So, tell us all the things you want to know. And I think as obviously all the transfer rumours wheel out, we'll get a better idea, won't we, of what's going to happen at Manchester United in the next few weeks.
What about in the next few days? Because Antony sustained an injury, it seems like he is going to miss the remainder of the season. We'll maybe pick up on that next week when we have some confirmation. I don't think we have it yet as I record this, but it seems to be that he's going to miss the FA Cup final, which is a massive shame because he has, as much as you want to criticize him, he does add a lot of balance and a big threat on the right-hand side, even if he doesn't carry through with the threat that he offers at times. Luke Shaw, concern. Again, we don't know the extent of that. Subbed at halftime. I think this is a rest in for Fulham and just try and get him ready for the FA Cup final.
Well, I definitely don't want to see Luke Shaw at Fulham. Like, if Ten Hag plays him, I will be doing backflips in my seat. Like, I really hope that Ten Hag goes full rotation now and we see all the dregs of the squad playing against Fulham. It really doesn't matter, being honest, does it?
A final hurrah for the.
I reckon the captain will lead us out. I really do. I think Maguire will be in that game, and I think there'll be quite a few other people who won't be at the football club in a few weeks' time. So there will be some of that going on. Just a sad end to the season for Antony, of course, with that injury, and he will now miss the cup final. But, you know, one guy's misery is another guy's opportunity. And I think it was quite interesting to see Jadon Sancho on the right last night, in the sense that I thought he looked better on the right than on the left. So, like, on the left, where I think, like Ten Hag said yesterday and today, Jadon prefers to play off the left. Does he? Does he prefer to? Or is that just where you prefer him to play? So I think that Jadon actually looked much more natural on the right. Obviously got really good assist. And I think in the second half, his performance picked up. Whereas in the first half on the left-hand side, he just, again, looked a little bit all over the place and wasn't quite sure. But then so did a lot of Man United footballers. So the FA Cup final could be a massive opportunity for Jadon Sancho to reboot his Manchester United career as a right-sided player. And, you know, you can't invert on the right because you haven't got that player with the left foot. Also might mean that you see Garnacho move to the left. You might see then Rashford move to centre forward. So all of these things might change just because of one player being injured. But it gives Ten Hag options, doesn't it? And I don't actually think they're particularly bad options.
I was going to ask you a question about the cup final, but we'll leave that for next week. Well, we're getting close to the end. Any closing thoughts or things you want to touch on before we do?
Oh, I'm just glad it's over. Like I've been saying for weeks to our audience here and people on Twitter that I've just wanted to I just wanted this to have been done weeks ago and you could just cruise the end of the season. And today is the first day, Scott, where I kind of just feel a little bit more complete. I just kind of think to myself, yeah, you got a cup final coming up. And wouldn't it be nice to beat Man City? But you're the underdog. You're not the favourite. If you haven't got Shaw, if you haven't got Antony, you are definitely weakened. But the job is done. You're in the Champions League next year and you got a trophy in your pocket. And now that trophy, Scott, the League Cup, does mean something. You know, I said last week, it means nothing until you get in the Champions League. And I think that some of the players said it last night as well, didn't they? I think Ten Hag said, you know, we won a trophy, but we have nothing. And what he meant was you need to have Champions League football next year. That is just part of your lifeblood. You need that. This football club needs that oxygen that the Champions League provides to help you sign players and to keep you rolling. So very pleased that we're in the Champions League. We made top four. We might even come third. And I think at Brentford, Scott, we all would have taken that. We'd have grabbed that, wouldn't we? We'd have gone top four this season. How? Because
go back and watch that show, actually.
We all would have thought, at that point, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, like we thought we were going to have the season Chelsea have had. Like we did. We thought this is going to be a really tough season. And will Ten Hag last? Like, will the Glazers look at this and say, 6 months of failure, out the football club, let's now go and get... They could have gone and got a Nagelsmann, couldn't they, at this point? You know, they could have moved Ten Hag out if he was unsuccessful. So there's always people there that you can go get. So, but Ten Hag, I think, he said one thing last night that really got me, and I thought it was brilliant. And he talked about Brentford, but they said, you know, how do you deal with the pressure here at Man United? And he went, I like it. And that was it. And I was like, yeah, this guy was born to be at our football club. He's the right person. So I look forward to season 2 under Ten Hag. I look forward to new signings. And I look forward to maybe a better brand of football. And maybe, fingers crossed, a title challenge.
I do think we're going to wrap it soon, but I do think that the words title challenge are in this camp's minds. Like the suggestions are that, like I saw Bruno's interview afterwards and I just thought, you know, regardless of what you think of Bruno, he ultimately said something along the lines of this isn't really an achievement. You know, we need to be aspiring for more. And this is just a necessary step that United need to take to accelerate the path. And that is the case. And whether they can do it next season or whether it's the season after, like the transfer window will have a big impact on that. But as a fan base as people who have followed United for 20, 30, I'm sure there's people who listen to this podcast have been following them for decades. Ultimately, United, you should be expecting that United challenge at the very top of the league. And just because of 10 years of mismanagement, don't think that, Erik ten Hag has brought that belief back in. It feels like the camp and the players that are currently there recognize that they are there because they're at Man United, because this is a club that expects to win everything. And you can go into next season expecting a title challenge, not necessarily getting one, but that's where the expectation level should be. And it's about correcting that, of course.
Of course. 100%. And I think that this is where we stand at this juncture, this crossroads at Manchester United, is that, yes, things will happen with the ownership. There will be some kind of perverse irony that if the Glazers, who have pillaged the football club now for so many years, almost 2 decades worth, that their parting gift to us is Erik ten Hag. Like, that will be kind of perverse, because that will be remembered that they hired this guy if Erik ten Hag has long-term success. But yeah, I'm with you with Bruno, in the sense that Bruno's going to be the club captain next year. Let's be honest. Yeah, we're about to sell the one that we've got, and he's not going to stay at the football club. Even last night, where you're rotating and maybe in the game to come at Fulham, he can't get minutes. He's completely fallen out of favour. He knows his time is done at Manchester United. So I think Bruno is the natural choice to take the armband. And I like his message. And if that's the message he's putting through the squad, and we know that it is, that's great, isn't it? Also, it's great, Scott. Did you see kind of how Casemiro celebrated last night? A guy's won 5 Champions Leagues, but he gets it. He understands what it means for a top club like United to be back in the Champions League. And he tweeted out, he was like, we're back. This is where we wanted to be. This is why he came to Man United. He wanted to help United get back to the promised land. So United are halfway there, because being in it is the most important thing. But then after that, you've got to go and try and win it, haven't you? And if you're going to go get Kane, you're going to go get Mount, you're going to go get Rice. But say you even maybe you don't want them, and you go get an Osimhen. You're going to have to say to Osimhen, yeah, we've got more on the table here than Napoli and other football clubs, because we're Manchester United. So that's all to play for now. Now you're in the Champions League. So again, just congratulations to the lads, because I think they do deserve it, Scott. Like, as much as we are hard on them and we push them, and I know I'll berate Bruno for losing the ball, I'll keep doing that, because don't lose the ball, Bruno. But they've all worked together, and I think it's been a real team effort this season.
Final throwback. I remember after that 4-0 defeat at Brentford, the word relegation was mentioned in some quarters, and Erik ten Hag was Erik 10 games, or Erik 10 weeks, or Erik 10 months. And he's very firmly put that behind him.
When we played Chelsea earlier in the season, Graham Potter, yeah, when they were 1-0 up, they scored in the 87th minute, and we equalised in the 92nd, Casemiro, we were below Chelsea in the league. Let that sink in. So that's early in the campaign, and we know how bad it was right at the start. But to reinvent yourself and navigate stuff, and you went from a team that was doing nothing right to a team that started to press, a team that started to have a bit of shape, a team that then became defensively very good. De Gea, Martinez, Varane, having that kind of triumph from those 3, making sure that you were getting clean sheets one way or the other. Yeah, you can't play out from the back like Man City, but at least we were getting clean sheets. You've still got those things, and you can develop them next season. I'm looking forward to seeing Martinez come back. That was one thing I was thinking last night, seeing him come back to the team. If Bruno Fernandes wasn't the captain, I think I'd probably like Martinez to be it, because he is the heart and soul now, I think. So, but a great season. Like, I really do. Like, let's hope we can cap it off at Wembley. And of course, we will talk about the cup final in the next show.
Yeah, we'll be back on Tuesday. We'll be doing Tuesday and Friday next week. Thanks for listening, everyone. This has been The Promised Land from me, Scott, and Rob, we've given you a transfer-y show today, but now we can actually start looking forward, because Champions League is secured. Job essentially done.
Yeah.
And we'll be back for more over the course of the next few weeks.
And go get high this week. Say to yourself, I can get high. We can celebrate this, because top 4 is not a trophy, but it's what you need. It's what this football club needs.
Yes, subscribe wherever you get your pods, Apple, Google, Spotify, and the likes. Watch us twice a week. We'll be back on Tuesday to talk about the final day of the season and some probably more transfer news. Maybe we'll have some ownership developments that we can actually speak about by that point. Fingers crossed. We'll see. But yes, follow us on Twitter as well, @_Scott Saunders, @_Rob_B, and @PromiseAndMU for the show. Rob, thanks very much. From me and from Rob, this has been The Promised Land. Manchester United are back in the Champions League. And have a great bank holiday weekend, everyone in the UK. And have a great weekend, everyone, everywhere else. Thanks for listening.